Please join me in welcoming Sarah Aguilar, Deputy Director of Pima Animal Care Center.
Thank you. So I have to tell you guys that right before we started this, I got a message from a staff member at PAC, at Pima Animal Care, telling me that my hospice cat, foster cat, that we thought was dying like 2 months ago, got adopted. So I'm sad, but also really excited. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about length of stay in general. We're not going to go into it in a lot of detail, but I do want to make sure that there's some basic things that everyone should be doing and that you understand those things. And then we're going to move into like rapid fire. Here's 20 things that you can do tomorrow for free. And hopefully have time for questions. You may have noticed, hopefully it worked, I put a comment into the agenda thing that's a link to a Google Drive. So I put some files in there that we're going to mention really, really briefly, but that's a good starting point for some more information for you. So why do we care about length of stay? For me, the most impactful part is that every day an animal spends in a shelter is a day closer to not making it out the front door. It's not just about numbers and data, it's the lives that those represent. If you're a rescue-based organization, even if you don't have a brick and mortar facility, every day that a pet is staying in your foster home is using resources and minimizing the volume of animals that you can assist. So clearly, it doesn't matter. A lot of people will say if the animal's in a home, length of stay isn't as important. And I don't believe that that's true. So the very first thing that you need to have is a robust volunteer and foster program. If you don't have these things in your organization, then all of the other items that we're going to talk about become really trivial. So volunteers and fosters are the key to most successful programs. Bless you. At PAC, we've got fantastic volunteer and foster programs. We are lucky enough that we have actually 4 foster coordinators. We have a volunteer coordinator and a volunteer manager, and that's probably more than most organizations have. Most of you probably have one person doing both of those jobs. But some of the studies that we've seen throughout shelter organizations across the nation is that the average foster coordinator can send 1,500 to 3,000 pets to foster a year. And the average volunteer coordinator can successfully manage and support 100 volunteers. So start there, first of all. Once you've got a robust volunteer program, it can be really overwhelming for your volunteers to try and solve all of the problems and do all of the things. So we highly suggest that you have some targeted programs for them to participate in that focus on specific populations within your shelter. At PAC, we've got Top Dogs. They sort of do like canine fun camp. It's almost the equivalent of like good citizen training, but it's not officially good citizen training. We've got Mature Mutts that focus on our older population. Mission Possible is kind of my favorite name. They focus on cats with medical needs. And then our decompression program is the most dedicated group of volunteers I've ever met. And they focus on under-socialized dogs that are not adapting well to the shelter, that instantly are, the ones hiding under the bed, cowering in the corner, and they provide some consistency in working with them. So when you're talking about length of stay and worrying about what to do with your long stay pets, the first thing is that you need to know what your length of stay is. This can be sort of tricky. I had a conversation with somebody from another shelter yesterday, and we were talking about the intricacies of length of stay. And one of the things is to get your data. This slide can be really complex and overwhelming. This was Monica Frendon's slide. If anyone knows her, she's supposed to present with me. She abandoned me. But this is a pretty in-depth gathering of data. It may be a little hard to see across the room, but it includes animal identification numbers, names, age, how long they've been in the organization. It includes sort of what the ongoing issue is. And this is with Awesome Pets Alive. So they're pulling the most complicated and challenging pets out of the county shelter. And then she has a beautiful graph. But it doesn't really matter how fancy your data is, as long as you know it. This is just a spreadsheet with animal names, days in the shelter, and which kennel number the animals are in. So this was what we used in Ventura, where I worked before moving to Tucson. And we focused on just the top 20 longest stay dogs and ended up coming up with some ways to get them some extra marketing and adopted. But it was a real simple, just spreadsheet on a piece of paper. Is there anyone in here that's doing rounds daily in your shelter? Okay. If you're not doing this, you need to. Smaller organizations, it's easier. If you're a foster-based organization, you can do something similar, just in like a virtual meeting or through like Skype. And the point of rounds is to look at the animals that aren't moving through your organization and identify why that is. Identify what the barrier is and what you can do to help them move to the next step. So at PAC, we house, on average, 420 dogs on our shelter at a time, and in the winter, we've got about 120 cats. And then we have another 700 pets in foster, and in the summer, those numbers almost double. And so for us to get through every animal in our shelter each day is nearly impossible. So what this team does is they focus on pets that have been in the shelter for 30 days. And there's a representative from our foster team, rescue team, adoptions, our medical clinic, and our behavior or wellness teams. And they meet every single day for 1 hour. And if they don't get through everything in an hour, they stop. They don't drag it out and make people start to kind of dread this. It's 1 hour. We get through as many as we can. And they're identifying not just behaviors that may be concerning, but they're also finding things like, well, this dog has a cherry eye, and though it's not a medical emergency, it's preventing adopters from looking further into it because they don't know what it is. Sometimes it results in just moving animals to different kennels. Open your doors. This seems kind of silly, but these hours on the left-hand side, this is an actual adoption center that posted their hours online. I left their name off, but they're closed Saturday and Sunday. So being available and open when the public is available to come to your facility is huge. Secondly, open your actual physical doors inside your organization. This picture here was originally designed as like an isolation quarantine type room for cats at PAC that were sick. And we just opened the doors and put signs up that said, hey, these cats are sick. Come in and see them. And there's signage about handling and things, but we don't have any animals that are off limits to be seen. And that's a huge, huge factor in helping get things adopted. Just taking a picture. So is making all of your pets visible. So this is another area of our kennels. How many of you have ringworm cats or dogs? A lot of you. How many of your ringworm pets are visible to the public? Oh, good, good, more than I suspected. So we created a whole wing in our cat room that's called the Fungal Jungle. And it's super cute, and they've decorated it with lions and toucans and tigers and monkeys. And there's rules to going in there, and we've got gowns and gloves and things. But we let people come in. A lot of those cats get fostered, so they go home to people that are willing to treat them. We're very clear about what the expectations are, what ringworm is. Don't just make your pets visible in your building, but also online. This is really important if you don't have a brick and mortar facility to make sure that all of your pets are available. So this is a screenshot from Pet Harbor. And I randomly picked the Portland, Oregon area. And you can see there's quite a few organizations on here that just have one animal. It's very possible that they are a rescue organization that actually only has one animal. I'm not familiar with all of them. But a lot of times, especially in today's day and age, the first way that people start looking for pets and they come to your organizations is through electronics and through the web. We were talking earlier this weekend about fast tracking an intake, and there was an organization that said, we don't need to do that. But having a fast track process or making pets available as soon as they enter is really, really important. Did any of you go to the presentation about you just came in, so now it's time to go? It's not exactly what it was called, but. So we have a fast tracking process where our admissions team is able to make any pet available that doesn't have a concerning history, that they don't have issues with vaccinating. Our owner surrenders are immediately available. If it's not through an instant adoption type process, because maybe there was something concerning, maybe the dog didn't like to be muzzled and vaccinated, then we also have a reservation process. And this is like a pre-adoption where people can put down a deposit, I guess. That's not really, that sounds like the wrong word. But they put down the adoption fee and they commit to adopting this animal as soon as it's available. Sometimes the pet needs to finish out its stray hold. Sometimes it needs an evaluation. Sometimes it just needs a medical something. And it makes sure that the first day that this pet is available to go, that it leaves. It reduces any just extra time waiting for something else to be done. Star Stuff was a really cute cat. So Monica and I, in preparation for this presentation, did a really super official Facebook poll. And we asked people within their organizations, what day starts extra marketing? What's the date that triggers something? What date do you consider to be a long stay for your organization? And what we found is it varies wildly from 14 to 120 days. And that it was largely based on the size of the organization, whether it was a private or a public organization like municipal shelter or a rescue group, and did they have a facility or was it solely foster-based? And if you could imagine a small foster-based rescue that takes in maybe 400 pets in a year, having a 120-day length of stay doesn't really seem unreasonable. But imagine if it was only 30 days, how many more pets they could help. Jacksonville Humane Society, I will gladly plug their program. They started a long stay task force and had a checklist of items that it was a mix of staff and volunteer items that started at day 30 and was focused on moving pets out. And I borrowed it from them and met with our volunteers that work on with our longest stay pets. And I said, how do I make this all volunteer based? What are your ideas? What is your input? What would you do for the pet that digs out of a yard and it's been here 40 days? What would you do for a cat that doesn't like to be held, but it's declawed and also needs daily eye medication? What would you do at day 60 if it was still here? And pose this question back to them, and they actually came up with this list themselves. This is included in that link that I sent you guys. But this is all volunteer items, and we're going to run through a bunch of these. But this is literally just a checklist that they came up with, and I said, sky's the limit. What are your ideas? At an APA, they have a much more in-depth, step-by-step action plan for their pets. It doesn't matter, again, how detailed your plan is, it's that you have one. It's that you're doing something extra for these pets. So just like the data, knowing it, having something, talking about it is really, really important. So when we say talk about length of stay, we're going to start getting into the things that you can do instantly, by the way. The first thing is to communicate length of stay internally within your organization. Does everyone in your organization know who your longest stay pets are? This is a picture of an email that gets sent out every Monday. It's automated through Chameleon, and it lists any pets that have been in our organization over 30 days. It's dogs and then cats. So I promise you it's much longer. And as you can see here, we're really lucky at PAC. Our average length of stay for dogs is about 11 to 12 days, and our average length of stay for cats is about 8 to 9. And we're taking in about 18,000 pets a year. And so part of it is this. It's talking about it. It's saying, oh my gosh, we've got a dog that's been here over 100 days. All hands on deck, what do we do? This also goes to volunteers who then share it within their volunteer group. So we've got one volunteer that sort of took the lead. He takes this email every Monday and he puts it in a spreadsheet and he sorts it and he figures out which pets actually came back from foster and have a longer length of stay than is shown, which is a whole nother side subject. But, and then he tells everyone like, hey, troops, this is not going the right direction. He's stepped into a role of leadership and motivates everyone and draws attention to this issue because the volunteers are equally aware that every day in that shelter matters. We set up a communication center. So what this consists of is in the middle is that email printed out. And it's in a place where all volunteers and our public can see it. The public doesn't really know what they're looking at, but it's not hidden somewhere. It's right where folks see it every day, right outside of our volunteer space. On the right-hand side, there's some flashy kennel cards, which we'll get into in a second. Some extra like flyers people can take and hang in the community. On the left-hand side is some behavior protocols for how to deal with some of the behaviors that pets present after being in a shelter, over-arousal and leash biting and some things. And then on the very left, there's the two little like file holders for the walls. And what we've done is we took that long stay checklist that I showed you a couple slides ago and we laminated a whole bunch of them. And we keep clean copies there with there's China markers, permanent markers, and wet erase markers so that volunteers can use the one appropriate based on the cleaning in their areas. But so they're really easy to grab so that when a volunteer says, oh my gosh, this dog has been here 35 days, it doesn't have a checklist, they can easily grab one and put it on the kennel. This is Bella and our licensing supervisor, Jen. We encourage our staff at all levels to engage with the pets in the shelter. Bella's owner had passed away, and the next of kin couldn't take her, and Bella had been in the shelter for about 60 days. And Jen took her out during a break one day and took her for a walk and rolled in the grass with her and took this adorable picture. And Bella was adopted shortly afterwards. Jen shared the pictures and her story on social media, became her advocate, and got Bella adopted. So engaging your staff and encouraging them to be involved as well is really important. Talking about this on social media, does your public know about length of stay? Do they know that there's pets in your organization that have been there 30 days, 60 days, 100 days, a year in some cases? So on the left, this was a post that we did that just says, hey, we're tracking this information. We went from 21 dogs over 100 days to 1. And just a public kind of thank you to the volunteers and staff that made that happen. We also do Long Stay Sunday. So every Sunday we do social media posts about our long stay pets. Some days it's 1, some days it's a handful, some days it's videos. It varies, but we always talk about Long Stay Sunday. So the next part about reducing length of stay and dealing with pets that have been in your organization for a while is increasing their adoptability. Typically, they're a long stay because of something. So identifying what that is and helping to improve it. The number one best way to do that is through foster. It's really hard to explain to someone that a pet that's lived in a cage for 60 days is really, really friendly and cuddly and likes to be on a couch when you have no pictures. Nobody knows that for sure. We found when we started doing this that we had pets that had been in our care for up to 3 months and we didn't really have any information at all. And that was really sad. We've had this pet for 90 days and nobody knows anything about it other than they can walk it. So foster is really the most important thing, making sure that whether it's for a night, a weekend, longer, getting more information and getting the pictures of pets in homes. Doing group day trips or hikes. Our organization just did a major hike through the desert 2 weeks ago with pets from the shelter and fosters and was actually picked up by the news. But being able to show pets, I guess mostly dogs. Nobody's taking cats on hikes, right? But being able to show dogs not only behaving well on leash and walking and interacting with people, but also being in close proximity to other dogs. It looks like this slide is in here twice. Or 3 times, maybe. Or, oh, wait, there it goes. Okay. How many of you are working with any kind of a trainer outside of your organization? Okay. So typically the most prohibitive factor in that is cost. Well, we can't afford a trainer. We can't afford to send dogs to training groups. In Ventura, California, we work with Dog Genie. She's amazing. She has classes that are about 6 weeks long, once a week, and at the last minute, she'll call us and she'll say, I have an opening. I had somebody cancel. Do you have a shelter pet or a foster pet that can come? And so knowing who the trainers are in your community and developing partnerships with them, a lot of times they can work with you to get you some free training. This isn't by no means like behavior modification, but this is like learn some basic commands, learn how to walk on a leash. When you have that certificate, it goes a long way to speaking to an adopter. We mentioned, all right, I give up. I don't know what's going on. Okay, there we go. So we mentioned this briefly before. Is there cosmetic stop signs that are stopping adopters because they don't know what it is? Is it cherry eye? Is it a limp? Is it a skin condition? Can those things be addressed? A lot of times in larger shelters, well, probably all shelters, pets that have a medical cosmetic issue don't get addressed because it's not causing pain, it's not urgent, it's not life and death, right? It's not on fire, so we're not putting it out. But when this pet has been in your organization longer than your average length of stay, investing in getting that procedure done can make all the difference, and the pet can leave the next day because all of a sudden people don't see that as an issue. We found at PAC that even when we put up signs explaining cherry eye and saying, as soon as you commit to adopt, we'll handle this. We'll do it before the pet goes home. It wasn't the same as if we just did it. Okay, so marketing. There are professionals that know a heck of a lot more about marketing pets than I do, but there are some basics that make a huge difference. One of them is having a web bio. So if you have Chameleon, Pet Harbor, you do a web memo type, and it comes up with the content of that. If you're using some other software or you're posting on Facebook, making sure that you have information is really, really important. Our dog foster coordinator at PAC tells me all the time that she goes looking through other organizations' pets to try and get ideas, and she's appalled at how many don't have any information. It's just picture of a dog in a kennel. This was another one of my foster cats that was adopted recently. She came to us paralyzed, and she got to go swimming and do all kinds of cool things. But having that extra information makes a huge difference in making a connection with somebody through a screen. Kennel signs. So this is what we were talking about briefly. One of the things that we found is that when you decorate a kennel for a holiday, people are really engaged with that. And we had sort of stayed away from that because it looks too cluttery, there's too much stuff. And our adoption coordinator was like, let me just do Halloween. We'll just do like the 6 longest stay dogs. And they all got adopted. So I would, you don't want to do every single one. But drawing extra attention has really made a difference. This middle flyer, Lightning was super, super kennel reactive. And so if you're standing outside of his kennel gate, he's barking and jumping, and he looks really, really scary. And so for us, having this picture of him being a total doofus with just this statement that says, outside of my kennel, I'm just goofy and lovable, he got adopted. This third one on the right-hand side, this is a new one that our volunteers have been trying out with a lot of success. And this is it's like a third of a piece of paper that is attached to the side of the kennel card with a QR code. And if anybody doesn't know what that is, you scan it with your phone and it takes you to a website. And so they started making videos and loading them and putting these QR codes up. And they started tracking the hits. And we're not 100% sure if it's just like volunteers and staff going, look how cool this is. But these dogs are getting adopted, and oftentimes their videos are being seen 150, 200 times in the first week. Dog of the day, you could also easily do cat of the day. This is just another way to bring some extra attention to a pet. So having them visible outside of the kennel instantly makes them more approachable. Not to mention that if somebody's interested in this dog, they have somebody right there that can answer questions. So we have the dog of the day options at PAC. Any volunteer can do it. All they have to do is just come in and pick a dog and get the sign. And they can either sit in our adoption lobby right when people enter, or they can go to one of our first play yards that you see when you're walking from our lobby into our kennels. And there's just a sign, and it engages people. If you don't have a space that you can do something like this, what I recommend is getting dogs out on leash, walking them around while you're open. It sounds really scary to people, right? Like, what if they bite someone? They won't, I promise. No, I don't promise. That's a legal thing. I didn't say that. Strike that from the record. Day trips. These are some of the cooler things I've seen. This is Humane Society of Memphis and Shelby County. I don't know what state that's in, but they have these amazing backpacks that people wear when they take dogs out on day trips. It has, a bowl and food and snacks and things, but it's also like a marketing tool. I wish I had a better picture of them. But it says, ask me about this dog. There's a phone number, and it says, we're on a field trip from Humane Society of Memphis and Shelby County. On the right-hand side, these are business cards that we had in Ventura that our day trip folks took out. You could also take them as fosters. The day trip program there was called Hound on the Town, so it's HOTT, so they were hot dogs. So on the front of the card is the information for the shelter. On the back is where you put the pet's name or ID number. Fosters would also put their phone numbers or emails on there. This is the coolest thing. I don't know why we're not all doing this. This is like a one pet adoption event. Ventura staff and volunteers are really, really good at this. They didn't start doing it until after I left, and I was really sad. These are Facebook events that just say, hey, on Saturday, we're going to have an adoption event for Lily. We're going to talk about Lily. We're going to post her pictures all over. We're going to market this event just as if it was a giant national adoption weekend, but it's just for Lily. And it not only draws folks in that don't adopt a Lily, but adopt other pets, but it brings a lot of attention. They've hosted, let's see, my favorite one was like a bikini party. So there was a dog that they would put swimsuits on, and it really loved water, so they had like kiddie pools set up around the shelter, and they would put her in like a bikini, and she'd hang out in the pool, and then she'd have like a costume change. That was really cute. You can also do these off-site. I've seen a couple that are just come and meet this dog at this restaurant or this lounge. Spread the word. How many of you saw anybody handing out candy in their shelters or in their organizations for Halloween or Valentine's Day that included adoptable pet information? No one? One. Okay. So League City did Halloween candy. A friend of mine in Ventura fosters for a rescue, and every year she makes her kids Valentine's cards for school out of an adoptable pet. So this was this year's. This is Gracie. But all of a sudden, you've reached 40 children who take them home to their parents. It's just a new way to try and reach some folks that maybe aren't following you on social media. Okay, so know what your length of stay is. Talk about your length of stay, increase the adoptability of pets that have been there for a long time, and do marketing. So all of those things, they're relatively easy. It's hard to do them for 400 dogs. But if you start with just one, that's your longest, you can instantly make a difference. This is HIPAA. HIPAA was kind of the epitome of all of these things happening and the most amazing story. So HIPAA came to a shelter in Orange County in June 2018. She was adopted twice and returned. They have a volunteer group that focuses on long stays also. And they sort of match long stay pets up with handlers. And her handlers became her champions. They worked on her leash skills. They worked on muzzle training. They did her marketing. During the time that she was in the shelter, she tore her cruciate ligament in one of her legs. And the clinic couldn't handle her. And so every week when staff was talking about their long stay pets and their urgent cases, they would bring her up and say, what do we do about her, right? We can't really treat her, can't really let her live in pain. What are we gonna do? And so they decided that they were gonna give her a 2-week deadline, and they were gonna share her story with everyone. And her volunteer champions marketed the heck out of her. And an adopter appeared. And they told her, you know, this is the history and this is the medical needs, and we're not really sure how to do all this stuff. And the adopter was really, really interested, but they couldn't afford this like $5,000 surgery. So a rescue group simultaneously saw her online, and they said, we'll assist with the funding for the surgery. So in February of this year, like I think it was like 3 weeks ago, there was a vet in Southern California that also heard about the story and said, we'll do the surgery for just $1,500. And so HIPAA was released to her adopters on February 10th. On February 18th, she got the surgery that she needed and is happily living in a home, recovering, after having been like 2 years almost through the shelter system. So using all of these tools works. And when things align, change happens. This is my email. There are 2 S's. I think I've got maybe like a minute for questions. Yes.
Do you have any suggestions for working with fosters who are maybe great care providers for their animals, but it's like pulling teeth, getting them to give you any sort of bio, write-up, pictures, anything?
Yes. It's kind of a complex thing. What we do at PAC is we hound them for information, basically. It's kind of obnoxious. But we also make it really easy for them. We send them automated follow-up emails that just have a couple questions that they can answer. We have an online survey form that they can click on a link that's posted in our Facebook group and on our foster webpage that say, hey, just click this to answer a couple questions. We set up times for fosters to get photos done with photographers. We just try to make it as easy as possible and low barrier.
Can you explain how you calculate LOS? Length of stay?
Yes. The day they left minus the day they came in. Right? So what we do at PAC is every time, because we use Chameleon and there are some limitations, if anybody's been following any of the data presentations this weekend, there's discussions all over the place about how none of the shelter software systems accurately they don't accurately track what we do as organizations. And so foster is a big catching point. So the way that Chameleon works is every time a pet's outcomed and comes back, their length of stay resets. So when we do overnights, weekends, day trips, we don't outcome. We just make a note and the animal comes back to its kennel. If it's more than, I think at PAC we're using 4 days, then we do a full outcome to foster and a return. The volunteer that gets our length of stay email, he's one that goes through as he puts it into a spreadsheet and looks at some of that extra information. And he and I are meeting this week actually to talk about how to kind of automate that for him to make it easier. But I'm pretty sure that the standard is every time a pet exits, the length of stay resets, and it's definitely not telling the full story. But then there's this, as you kind of go down that rabbit hole, it's well, if a pet's gone for 30 days, is that sufficient to reset length of stay? If a pet's gone for 5 days, is that sufficient to reset length of stay? Like trying to come up with what that number is, the magic number, and it's really hard because it depends on the pet, of course. Does that not really answer your question? Okay.
I don't know if this exists anywhere, but I'm curious if you've heard of a formula to help calculate the cost per pet per day. So looking at making arguments to do things more proactively and maybe spend a little bit more money and time on the front end to prevent length of stay from increasing.
Yeah, so that can be really hard too. If you have an accounting background at all, there's all kinds of different methods of cost accounting and things. And, you know, are the fixed costs of operating a shelter, do those change based on the volume of animals? Like, it gets really messy. When I was in Ventura as the foster coordinator, I started with just labor to care for a pet. And I did this really complex math, and I came to 15 minutes per pet per day times whatever the average pay rate was. And I took it to our shelter manager. I go, look what I figured out. It's the, you know, the length of time that we spend each day caring for each pet. And he goes, is it about 15 minutes? And I was like, yeah, I just spent like 2 days doing all this, you know, calculating. He's like, oh yeah, I could have told you that. So it seems really minor, but when you're dealing with, you know, 12, 15, 18,000 pets a year, 15 minutes is about what each pet gets to be cleaned, to get new food and water, and that's it. So we started with that because it was easy to say the amount of time per pet directly, the total of that is directly based on how many pets are in the shelter, right? And every day that they're there costs X amount. There's some studies, I wish Bennett was here. I think it was South Carolina did something where they calculated that the average visit to a shelter costs, I think it was about $280 for a pet, and to keep the pet out of the shelter was like $160 or something. It was something like that. Don't quote me on those numbers. But there are some calculations out there and some discussions. It can get really complicated with fixed costs. Thank you.